Welcome to Followed by Mercy with Austin Gardner. This is where we talk about God's grace and mercy that meets us and follows us even in our lowest moments and lifts us to hope again. No matter what's been broken, His love still heals. So let's move from pain to praise together, because surely goodness and mercy does follow me and pursue me all the days of my life. I'm excited to be here today on Followed by Mercy, our podcast. And I am joined by a very good friend of mine named Stephen Underwood. And I really believe that what you're about to hear is going to change your life. And so thank you very much for being with me today, Stephen. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and what we're going to be talking about.
Well, I'm Stephen Underwood, as Brother Austin has already stated, and served as a foreign missionary under his mentorship and guidance over the last decade from 2013 until 2024. Met him when I was only 14 years old. And
That's a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. You can see the gray in my beard. I remember you did not have any white in your hair at the time. It was all brown.
No, I didn't. That's right.
But I was fortunate to take a trip down to Peru, where you were serving as a missionary, and saw the mission field, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do with my life. And I got to live that dream for about a decade. I loved it, enjoyed it. From the time that I was 15, that was my goal and plan. But then I, like a lot of young guys, got a little sidetracked. I spent 6 years in the Army. I did a tour in Iraq, served in a special operations unit called Company H, long-range surveillance. And all of that, of course, the Lord was using to prepare me for what I believe was what I'm doing today, what I believe is what I'm doing today. And that's working with a company called Black Flag International. It's a private security company. The private security company does a lot of what we call executive protection details. So high-value clients, high net worth clients, and things like that. But we also have a nonprofit arm, which is really what I believe God has prepared me for all through these years for this point in time in my life. And it's called Black Flag Innocence Foundation. And the goal, the focus, the mission is that we not only provide the surveillance and investigation, but we rescue victims of child sex trafficking. And once they are safe, they're out of harm's way, the person that we've been investigating is in custody by local law enforcement. And then we connect them with resources to where they can not just be left in the wind, go back to the system that put them there in the first place, but connect them with resources to where they can heal, get the therapy that they need, and to heal and go on to live halfway normal lives. And I say halfway normal because there's a trauma that will last, that will exist for many, many years after something like that sometimes will take a lifetime to heal from. But we want to put them in a place where they can begin that healing process. And because Black Flag Innocence Foundation is a faith-based organization, we know that the ultimate goal is not simply to help them in this temporal life, but to help them to know that they have eternal life. And so that's one thing that really helps me to be fully invested, to devote my time and energy into, is that I know that the ultimate goal is not simply to rescue children from temporal harm, but to rescue them from the harm of eternal hell and see them one day in heaven.
I'm very excited because we're going to spend a week or so with this interview of Stephen and other people about the Black Flag Initiative, and I hope that you will learn a lot about that. But Stephen, I kind of want to dig into who you are. So tell us about your life before the military.
So I joined the military at 19. So my life before the military was that of a typical teenager. I was not a very good student. I had the capacity, I had the capabilities, but I was a little bit lazy. I thought I was the smartest guy in the room. And so I was a little bit bored with school. I ended up skipping more classes than actually attending, and I just graduated by the skin of my teeth. But yeah,
Well,
yes, sir.
I'm going to drive you home. I think let's talk a little bit about your dad.
So I had a good.
So the kind of home you're raised in, at least I've heard your story, and I
Right.
want I want our listeners to hear your story. You and your dad had something.
We were very close. It was a strange relationship, at least for me looking back. He died in 2014. He was only 54 years old. He had a massive heart attack. But my dad and I were very close. He was my best friend. But we also butted heads a lot. And that's because I was so stubborn.
I don't understand. I mean, I've never known you to be stubborn or obnoxious. I don't know.
And it's crazy how your mindset changes as you get older and you look back and you even remember things differently just because even some of the fights that we had, it's like I can see what he was trying to do at that point, and it's like if I'd just listened,
Well,
or if
now
I
you
had,
have boys.
and they're just as bad as I am.
Okay, tell the people about a little bit about your family and your sons were all named kind of weirdly, and everybody ought to know that.
So I was raised an avid Tennessee Volunteers fan, and so I bleed
What's that mean? Tennessee
to
Volunteers,
the football
military. Is that
team.
military?
No, 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 no. That's well, I guess you could call it that. They were the volunteers of the American Revolution that fought in in the
Uh,
mountains, doing guerrilla warfare type tactics before that was even a thing.
I'm just picking on you. Go ahead.
But so of course the greatest quarterback in all of history is Peyton Manning. He graduated from Tennessee.
Nobody would debate that, right?
I don't think so. Well, some might say Tom Brady, but he had to cheat to deflate
Oh
the
my.
balls in order to.
So, all right, folks, this was about Black Flag Initiative, not what was it? Deflated footballs.
Right, right. But so my oldest son, his name is Peyton, and of course Peyton has two brothers, and our middle son, his name is Eli. I understand Eli did not go to Tennessee, but he was still a Manning. And then our youngest son's name is Neyland, named after General Robert Neyland, one of the greatest football coaches in Tennessee history, and also the name of the stadium that they play in. Well, the third brother, he was apparently, this is the story I've heard, he was a better football player than both Peyton and Eli, but he had a disease that limited his playing ability that he found out that he had in college. But his name's Cooper, so Nealon's middle name in honor of him is Cooper.
Okay. All right. So I would ask who has the most influence in your life, but I'm getting a feeling it might be Tennessee football.
They have a lot of influence in my life, but that relationship I had with my dad really helps me to think about decisions that I make today as an adult and as a dad. One thing that I remember about him is that he was an extremely hard worker. He worked more than he should. I don't remember taking family vacations ever. It wasn't until I was in the military and moved out of the house that they took my brother to Myrtle Beach for a family vacation. So I thought that was interesting. I was a little bit jealous about that.
I sense a sense of bitterness even today.
A little bit. Ashley and I were talking about that just the other day that, and I get it in the 90s and things like that. Everybody was working and the economy was good. So people were trying to take advantage of that. And so it wasn't until I was gone to where he took the time to actually take a family vacation. Of course, I was out of the house. But that does drive the decisions that we make as a family today that, we are going to on purpose take time to spend with our entire family. I just read this statistic last night, as a matter of fact, that the most vivid memories of an adult are between the ages of 5 and 10 when they take family vacations. And so,
Well,
my boys have lived in 3 different countries already. They're all on their second passport. And so I think in their formative years that they have created quite a few memories. They're all fluent in Spanish and to this day still talk over video games with their buddies in Argentina. And it's funny walking through the house and hearing them speaking Spanish while playing video games.
but before we move on and leave them, could we just tell real quickly how old they are?
Yeah, so my oldest son is 17. He'll be 18 in November. And so he's coming up on a pretty big decision after high school. He still has one more year of high school, but I gave him the same option my dad gave me. You can either get a job You can either go to college or you can join the military. And so, but, he said, I'm not going to support you for the rest of your life. You're going to learn to work and provide for yourself.
That
Uh,
was
I,
a good decision.
and I'm very grateful that he was hard on me in that aspect, because I know what it means to live very humbly and just scrape by to be able to exist. But it's in those hard days that you learn, sometimes you have to sacrifice the things that you want to provide the things that you need.
Yep. All right. The other two kids?
And then Eli is 12 and he'll be 13 in September. He's our rainbow baby. There's a 5-year gap in between him and Peyton. Ashley had a miscarriage in between. And so that was pretty tough on both of us. And I think there for a while, she was extremely nervous about trying to have another child. And so we just waited on the Lord for that and took our time. So that's why there's a 5-year gap.
Okay. One more child?
And then Neeland is our youngest. And of course, he's the baby of the family. He can do no wrong. I will say this about Neeland. He is more like Ashley than the other two. He's got a calm, sweet demeanor about him, very awkward in social situations, but just has a heart of gold. And so all my boys have hearts of gold. They'll sacrifice and give the shirt off their back for somebody that's in need, which I'm very thankful for. I hope that they've seen that in my life, especially working on the mission field and doing ministry, working with young people that didn't have families.
Well, maybe one of the more important people in your family we haven't really mentioned much. You've said her name 2 or 3 times. I see her picture behind you.
Yeah.
Let's tell everybody a little bit about Ashley and the relationship you have there.
So Ashley is the most important person in our family. She's the rock. Outside of Jesus saving my soul, she saved my life. I met her when I was home on leave from Iraq. We met for one night around Thanksgiving, because that's when I took leave. And we met through a mutual friend. And he told me, he's like, hey, man, we're going to go on this double date, and I'm going to be with this girl named Ashley. You're going to be with her friend named Mindy. And 5 minutes into it, I realized that neither one of them thought it was a date. They just thought we were going to hang out and they were going to get a free meal. But I realized that I really liked Ashley. And since she didn't think that it was anything romantic, I decided to take advantage of that and talk to her most of the evening. I immediately put her to the test because I wanted to see how high maintenance she was. She was too pretty, too gorgeous to not be high maintenance, but I realized that she was not at all. She came from a very simple background, born and raised in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but for half of her childhood, she was raised by her grandparents on a farm in Appleton. And so very simple. So as we were driving around, they were talking about where we were going to go eat. And of course, I had the money to say, yeah, let's go to this nice steakhouse and really treat her. But instead I said, hey, there's a Crystal. Let's go through Crystal. And she was content with a sack full of crystals and just happy as she could be. And so I said, you know what? There's something to this girl. She was not saved at the time. She was raised in the Seventh-day Adventist church, very religious, but she was lost. And so I went back to Iraq for 10 months. We didn't exchange phone numbers, email. At that time, MySpace was the only social media platform that existed. So I tried to find her on there, but I didn't know her last name. But I remembered where she told me she worked. And so the moment that I got relieved of active duty, and after that deployment, after we did our post-deployment process, I got in my Jeep and drove straight to her workplace. I remember walking through the door and she saw me before I saw her. And I just remember her running towards me, and she got to me and wrapped her arms around me. And 2 weeks later, we were together.
Amen.
And we've been together for 18 years.
Well, praise the Lord. Okay, tell us about why you went in the military. How in the world did you decide to go in the military?
Well, I did a 6-month internship with you in Peru, and I had committed to a year, but again, in those character developing stages, I lacked in that area of commitment and following through. And so I came back to the U.S. and I decided that I would do what all my friends were doing and go to college. Tried that for a while and really did not enjoy it. I didn't like somebody always telling me what to do and when to do it. And so I joined the military, where that's exactly what they do, is tell you what to do and when to do it.
And you don't get out of that commitment.
No, no, it's not a decision that you can say, I don't feel like doing that today. And so I was pretty heavy growing up. I'll just say it, I was a fat kid growing up. And so I had to drop quite a bit of weight. But in that year between Peru and college, I dropped about 100 pounds. And I was actually talking to a Navy recruiter because, I don't know, there was something interesting to me about the Navy. But then a friend of mine told me about Company H and long-range surveillance, and I thought that was very interesting and thought that that might be something that I could do. And so I went and talked to the recruiter there and ended up serving my entire time in that same unit, including that deployment in Iraq. And then we also did search and rescue operations after Hurricane Katrina down in Gulfport, Mississippi, and New Orleans. And so I had a great time. But the Army was exactly what I needed to help me to grow and mature in the character level of, even when things are hard, you do it out of discipline. I still use that today. Motivation comes and goes. There's days that you feel like it. There's days that you don't feel like it. But when you have discipline in what you do, it doesn't matter how you feel, you accomplish the mission.
I don't think those of us that are non-military understand. I think you're saying Company H. You only
Yes,
kind of
hotel
bring
company.
bring us non-military people up to date.
All right, so each unit has a nomenclature, just like any piece of equipment in the military, and they're labeled in order to designate them within the military. And I don't understand how they come up with all of that. I just know that I was a member of Company H, 121st Long Range Surveillance Airborne Infantry. And so that was the unit that I served in.
Break that down. I still don't get it.
So a unit would be roughly 120 soldiers broken up into, we had 5 platoons that would be about 30 people. And a unit would make up, there would be about 3 or 4 units that would make up a battalion. And a battalion would be, there would be 3 or 4 battalions that would make up a regiment. And so it's just that chain of command, but it's broken up into smaller segments. And so even within Company H, I was first platoon, and then within first platoon, I was team 6. And long range surveillance, we worked in 6-man teams.
Wait a minute. What is long-range surveillance?
It would be reconnaissance, gathering intelligence. If there's any hunters that listen, it would be the same thing as if you set up a blind in the woods, where you camouflage yourself into the terrain, and then you watch for your target, you gather that intelligence, report that intelligence back to the smart guys, the military intelligence, and then they would decide whether or not the intelligence was actionable, if they wanted to pursue that target, or if they felt like they had enough to where they could move on to the next. And so in Iraq, our mission, we worked along the Syrian border from the top of Turkey all the way down that Syrian border of Iraq, and we were responsible for capturing the terrorists and foreign fighters that were smuggling weapons and explosives from Syria into Iraq. And so there were a lot of villages that were along that border, and we primarily worked in the Sinjar mountain range, and they would use the Wadi systems, which are big trenches, basically, very deep, very wide, to smuggle those weapons, and they would embed themselves into the farmers and the sheep herders in that area. And that's how they would, fight their terroristic war in Iraq. And so we were responsible for capturing them, arresting them, and then turning them over to the Iraqi border police.
Okay, we're going to get into a story that is going to rip your heart out, of things that happened. And the reason the Black Flag Initiative is important to Stephen is not just that he likes it, but I think people like you have needed somebody to care about hurting disabled veterans. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I didn't expect this to happen. A little over a year ago, it's almost 2 years ago now. May will be 2 years. I lost a very close friend to suicide. Uh, Caleb Massey, and he was in my platoon. He worked in a different team, but he committed suicide, and went to his funeral and heard his story, heard about his struggles, and the sad reality is that I had no idea he was even dealing with it. And disability comes in a lot of different forms. Of course, you have veterans that were in IEDs, they were in explosions, they were shot, they were wounded, and all of that. But the one that's often overlooked is post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. And that was something that he was dealing with. Caleb was one of those guys that you could always have fun with. He made light of everything. Even in hairy situations, he would make a joke and make you laugh. And so when I was at his funeral, there was something that clicked, and it just gave me a sense of urgency to try to serve those that served our country and help them fight the battle that they don't talk about. It's one of those things that among most veterans is kind of taboo. We want to think that we are mentally strong and capable and can overcome any obstacle, because that's our motto, is adapt and overcome. But at some point, we've got to realize that we can't do everything on our own and in our own power, and we've got to search out for that help. We've got to look for that help. And so hearing Caleb's story, he lived a very simple life as well. He loved being outdoors, and for a while he even lived in a tent down by the river just because he wanted to be outside. But one of that was told at Caleb's funeral was that he was in Augusta, Georgia, and he met this homeless guy, and without thinking about himself or his own needs, he gave him the keys to his car and said, "Here, you may not have a place to live, but at least you got transportation."
Well, I
So,
cannot wait to hear more about his story and your story. And I want everybody to enjoy this. I want us to learn and grow. And so they will find information where?
so if you go to Black Flag, or excuse me, BFI-Innocence .com. That's the website for Black Flag Innocence Foundation, or blackflaginternational.com. That will also link you to the foundation, but that's the private security website. And it's got a wealth of information on there. We've got statistics on child sex trafficking and how many victims actually exist. People are unaware of how prevalent trafficking is. We think that happens overseas or in other countries, but it's right here in our backyard.
Okay. Well, we are going to break now, and we'll be back tomorrow with a lot more information. Fact is, in just a minute, tomorrow when this comes on for them, they will get to meet a person. Could you tell them who that is?
Yeah, so Alyssa Del Torre is going to join us, and she was a former Miss USA winner. She now does conferences for women's empowerment and business management, and she's going to join us and talk to us a little bit more about Black Flag Innocence Foundation. And she's a great lady, great source of information, and is really going to help us to understand more about what we do and why we do it.
All right. Well, I am looking forward to talking to you again tomorrow, and God bless you. Thank you for being with us. Thanks for listening to Followed by Mercy with Elsa Gardner. If today's message spoke to your heart, share it with someone who needs to know God hasn't given up on them. Remember, your pain isn't the end of your story. In Jesus, it can become praise. Thank you.